All right. Soundcheck. Soundcheck. See Farsight always here. First. Usually first. And ready to go for that sound check. Thank you, man. Thank you, man. A loyal follower for a long time, see Farsight. All right. Welcome, everybody, to CanHammer TV. This is July 2nd, the day after Canada Day. And this is episode 26. Maybe you should asterisk this episode, or maybe I'll asterisk this episode, because this is the first episode with official 9th edition rules. So probably, I said I was going to reset like the numbering or the titling. Should probably do that maybe from today's. I don't know. I have to think about it, or next time. So the last 24 hours have been pretty crazy. 36 hours since yesterday. First, we started to get, pictures of the whole rulebook drop. Then we got the mission pack with some distasteful watermarking. And then that seemed to be it. And then there was a witch hunt going on for who leaked this stuff. And at the end of the day, GW released a proper, nice PDF of the core rules this morning. Cool. Very nice. And now the embargo is gone on the core rules and the Indomitus box. And so all the people who get their preview copies, which is not me, are putting out their videos, and you're going to see those over the next few days. So there's going to be a lot of videos and stuff for you to watch. If you want the core rules, you can download them straight from Warhammer community website in like 20-something different languages. So it's all out there. If you want the mission, they have not put the missions out, the missions that are in the core rulebook. We do have that on the Discord, so it's in the pins in the Custodes channel. Join the Discord right there. That link should work. And it's in the pins in the Custodes channel. It is the just the 2,000 point Strike Force Eternal War missions, so the match play missions, and so check that out. I have confirmed with the preview people that I know, so Scary, for example, the guys at Mob Rules, I know a bunch of people who get preview copies. They did not receive preview copies of the chapter approved book, so the points book or the grand tournament format book. So nobody knows the GT missions or those secondaries, and nobody knows what the points are yet. And they, I presume GW didn't send those out, and after what's happened, they probably will not send those out. So we may not know the proper points until closer to the time of release, because we're still a few weeks out right now. So we should be happy we got the rules, and we can at least start to play 9th edition games, albeit using 8th edition rules, 8th edition points. And so that's cool. And big news, we are bringing you my first game of 9th edition and Custodes with the new book this week, or next week on Wednesday. And also will be the return of Phil to the stream. He is coming back to 40k for 9th with his Necrons, and so that's going to be good fun. And he's allowed in my house, so there we go. Francois is as well, but Francois is at the cottage for a few weeks, so boom. The other thing to say is that on launch day, July 25th, launch day, we will be streaming all day from Chris's house. 6 of us, myself and Francois, Chris, Nick Blackburn, Cody, and Sparkles, Jason Sparks, will be all streaming from Chris's house the whole day. We're going to play 2 games at a time, 3 rounds, like a little mini RTT with little breaks in between to talk about our impressions and to do a podcast episode. So that's going to be all day right here on July 25th on launch day. So be ready for that. We will certainly be ready, especially now we all got the rules weeks in advance. Okay, so that's going to be cool. What other announcements? That's it. July 25th is the release day, in case you live under a rock and you have not heard. And that seems to be about it. Shout out to people in the chat. See Farsight, Black Ice, Sean Stryker, all the usual. Ember Faith, welcome. And usual people, welcome to the show. Okay, so before we dive, so what we're going to do tonight is go through the 9th edition rulebook. We're just going to talk about things that we did not know already before. Okay, so we're not going to talk about stuff we already talked about that was already previewed. We're just going to talk about stuff we didn't know before. And of course, this is Custodes Tactica. This is from the mindset of being a Custodes player. Okay, there will be a podcast episode next week. Me and Chris will be talking about our general impressions. And then we're going to go through the mission pack, the Strike Force Eternal War mission pack that we have, and go through those 6 missions and all the secondaries. So that's going to be maybe the meat of the episode. There is the new missions. We've always been saying we need to know the missions to know how we build our armies. We need to know the missions. Well, now we kind of know the missions. We don't know that Grand Tournament book, how those missions will be different, but we know some of the missions that people might be playing. Okay, before we delve into the books, there are a couple of other things that came up that we should address. Number one, the data sheets for some of the new Marine stuff in the Indomitus box were leaked or previewed. And there is the new Storm Shield, which apparently everybody in Marine Army can get now. And it is now a 4+ invuln and +1 to save. So this has caused quite the controversy on the Discord. It's such a controversial topic that we've banished those people to the rules discussion channel where we can turn off notifications and close the door. The thing is, normally we have a 5+ invuln, and then our rule, Sworn Guardian or whatever it's called, gives us +1 to our invuln, so we all have an army-wide 4+ invuln. And if you want to go 3+ invuln, then you buy a Storm Shield. So if the Storm Shields are now 4+ invuln, so now it gives us a 4+ invuln, which our army rule still gives us to a 3+ invuln. That's the argument. Although obviously it's intended that +1 invuln army rule probably applies to our 5+ invuln, not war gear granted invuln. Anyway, that's the argument. And then also giving us +1 to save gives us a 1+ save, so it's like we're always in cover. And so that basically makes us immune to AP -1. And then if you're in cover, blah, 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 it all adds modifiers. So that's kind of the big argument, and we don't know if our Storm Shields are the same or not. So we don't know if this is a blanket-wide change to all Storm Shields. So anyway, we don't know anything really more than what we know, and people got pretty excited about it. So anyway, we'll wait and see what happens. The other thing that got leaked was a whole bunch of points, Marine points, and we don't know if these are official or not. They looked pretty official, and they seemed appropriate, so maybe they are official, but we got a bunch of all the Marine points changes, and most of the Marine stuff went up. Some of it appreciably. I think the biggest losers, not surprisingly, were the Thunderfire Cannon went up to like 130 or 140 or something, which quite reasonably it should have been in the first place. And the Whirlwind like doubled in price because it's probably going to be pretty good. Aggressors almost doubled, and Centurions went up a lot. You know, the Smash Captain went up like 15 points base cost. So a whole bunch of things went up, and so that's all fine. And so we'll see how everyone else's points go up, but it's all fine. You know, it's consistent. Somebody I know who plays Imperial Fist says their list went to 2,500 points. So that's pretty good. If we see 25% drop in number of models for Marines, I don't think anybody is going to be unhappy about that, except for Marine players. Okay. So, the other thing they dropped just today with the rules was this StarCraft bunker. Basically, it looks exactly like a StarCraft bunker. It's got like a big whirlwind cannons on the top, which fires missiles. And then it has like a bunch of flamers or heavy bolters. Anyway, we don't know much more about it than that. It had some stats for the missiles, pretty typical sort of missiles. And then they also dropped, much more exciting, these Necron pylons. And one of them is like fully clad. And then the other one is like half. The cladding's off, and then the third one is like fully revealed. It's pretty cool, and there's 3 of them, and apparently you're going to have to do something with allowing you to redeploy in the field, which is pretty sweet. So that's cool. And so it really looks like every army might be receiving a new piece of terrain. I mean, the St. Catherine's thing for the sisters. Now we got this stupid bunker, and then we got the 3 pylons. Like, who knows? Maybe every army is going to get a piece of terrain, kind of like AOS. So we'll see. And then, of course, they revealed the fortification detachment, which we'll talk about later. But so there we go. Okay, so let's go on. So first, we're going to go through the rule book, and then we're going to go through the missions. Okay. So the first thing we'll talk about, command phase, is the same as everyone knows. You gain your CP in the command phase. A lot of the mission primary scoring triggers at the end of the command phase. So this is kind of like your command phase now in AOS. And stuff like that. Okay, so no big deal. So first thing to discuss. So the engagement range has been defined as 1 inch horizontally or 5 inches vertically. So 1 inch horizontally, fine. Fair enough. That all makes sense. 5 inch vertically is going to cause some janky stuff going on. So I can see probably why they did this. They wanted to make it so that knights and monsters can fight 5 inches above the ground in combat, because if you're within engagement range, you can fight. And most of the GW terrain, apparently, like all the gantries and stuff, are all 5 inches high. So I can understand why they did that. But now, if you have a rune and you're 3 inches above, you cannot be above the enemy because you're in engagement range, because it's 5 inches. Well, 5 inch vertical is a lot. And that means if you're 5 inches above, 4.9 inches above an enemy model, you are actually in engagement range and you can fight. You're not anywhere near them. I don't know how your sword is supposed to hit them 5 inches away, but you can fight. That's pretty interesting. Anyway, I can see how there's going to be some jank when there's fighting in vertical runes with floors. I can just see that happening. That's going to be maybe something that causes issues in the future. So we'll see how it pans out. But it's just something interesting that there's a 5 inch verticality to it. Okay. So my general comments about the rulebook, before we get into the specifics, I thought that it was quite nicely laid out and that it's easy to read, and it's very precise and pretty clear. It's sometimes a bit wordy, but I can see why they did that, because they need to try and be as clear as possible. It's like reading a contract, basically. And if this is just PDF, obviously, if the real rule book has some pictures or picture examples, that would be nice, but it doesn't seem like there is, but it would have been nice. And you can see, as you read along the rules, where all the FAQs and stuff that have been in our existence for so long have been integrated. Okay, so not just as a side box, or it's just actually now part of the rules. So that's cool. That's exactly what we need. And they have specifically now split phases into sub-phases for things like at the end of the phase or the beginning of the phase. So there's no more of that stuff. It's going to happen in specific phases with specific orders. So hopefully we won't have any more of those kinds of questions too. So all in all, actually, I found that the rule book was quite easy to read. There's not a lot of room for disagreements in a lot of the things, although there will always be English arguments. But I thought it was pretty good and well laid out. And the other thing, sometimes they say like, it's your -1 to hit if you're here, because in the fog of war, you can imagine somebody hidden behind a tree would be like, they add these kind of fluff justifications to their rules in the old books. There's none of that here. There's no fluff at all. It's just like, this is the rule. This is it. It doesn't matter what the fluff is for the rule anymore, or why they feel that it's realistic or represents what might happen in a real battle. They've dropped all of that. It's just straight up. And the final thing that they've done is they have a paragraph of rule, then they have 2 or 3 or whatever bullet points with short sentences that sums it up. And that's great because most of the salient information is in these bulleted lists. If you were really enterprising, you could put all the bulleted lists together into a document and probably get the rules down to like 2 pages. But yeah, so that's cool. I really like it. Good job on writing the rule book. Okay, so they have specifically split movement phase now into move units and reinforcements. And reinforcements is the end of the movement phase now. So that's where all your deep strikers and stuff come in. So that's fine. That's all kind of set out nicely. Nothing really much has changed. I'm just going to go through and point out things that have changed that we don't know about already. Okay, so if I skip something, it's probably because it hasn't changed or because we already were previewed and we've already covered that in our previous episodes. Okay, so one change is falling back. So falling back, you can no longer cast psychic powers when you fall back. This is great. We hate psychic powers, and so if you can't cast it when you fall back, that's great. Nothing but good there, unless you're Titanic. Okay. I don't know if Magnus or Morty are Titanic. Maybe Rade can answer that for us. I don't believe that they are, but yeah. Okay. Cool. It also doesn't look like knights can fall and charge. So when you fall back, you cannot charge, and it does not make an exception for knights being allowed to charge. Titanic being allowed to charge when you fall back. I can't find that in the charge or movement rules. So therefore, no more knights tap dancing out of combat and then charging back in. Yes. So that's good. Okay. Reinforcement. So everything that's important is now capitalized. So reinforcements is capitalized. And basically reinforcements are people who start the game in whatever deep strike or whatever. These are people who naturally have ability to come on to deep strike. So Terminators, jetpack people, those kind of things, or if they have a specific rule that lets them not start on the battlefield. And those are your reinforcements, and that is different from things that are your strategic reserve, okay, which we'll come to later. So it's important to separate those two things because there's a little bit of a difference. So when you deep strike, so the only thing that's changed now, so your reinforcements can come in and you can set them up anytime in the match play missions. It's from turn 2 onwards, and if they start the battle off the field, they must come in by the end of turn 3 or else they're destroyed. Whereas if you go into strategic reserve after the game has started, you can come on any time in the rest of the game. So that's a difference again between reinforcements and strategic reserve. A lot of our units have native deep strike teleportarium, and so for us, all intents and purposes, it is unchanged. When you deep strike, you count as having made your maximum move. So again, they've just put that straight into the rules, clear as mud right there, and that includes flyers. Okay. All right, otherwise, nothing really much changed in the move phase. There's this little paragraph that got people super worried. You cannot move through terrain. You can move over it, but then that is all changed by the terrain rules, so wouldn't worry too much about that. And then fly, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's all basically the same. Aircraft has already been talked about. We did preview that. It was previewed a while ago, so we won't talk about aircraft. Okay. Heroic interventions, same thing. Transports, embarking, emergency disembarking. Okay, so yeah, that was all previewed already last week. I don't think we've talked about it on Tactica, but I mean, if you're going to run Land Raiders, you should know about the disembark and the emergency disembark rules, obviously. And obviously now that if you wrap a Rhino, opponent's Rhino, they can spend 2 CP and make sure that they're pretty much safe. So there you go. So people are pointing out that Knights, it's on their data sheet that they can fall back and charge, so fine. Okay, destroy chance. Okay, psychic phase. So the psychic phase has changed just a little bit. As we already said, they cannot fall back and cast spells. And now what you have to do is you have to cast all of your powers on one model and then go to the next. So that is a slight change, which just means people who play lots of psychers and powers need to assign their powers a little bit better and pick the order of psychers a little bit better. So there you go. So it's a slight but significant change for, and you know what, like usually when somebody with like 5 psychers starts casting powers and they're jumping back and forth, you don't keep track of that. You can't even remember what powers they have. They can't even remember what powers they have, and it's a mess. So hopefully this will be a little bit better. So there's a lot of people saying that you can now smite twice. No, you cannot. That sentence just states that smite is the exception to the rule whereby you can only cast a power one time. Any power one time. So you can cast smite more than one time. You as an army in the psychic phase. So I'm pretty sure that you will still only be able to smite once with a character. Okay? So don't get too excited, people. Don't get too excited. Okay. Otherwise, the psychic phase is unchanged. Okay, shooting is pretty much unchanged. I'm just looking for my little comment marks here, and doesn't seem to be any shooting rules that we haven't already seen. Number of attacks, ranged weapon types. Yeah. Okay. So under heavy weapons, so it says that infantry models with heavy weapons get -1 to hit if they move. And it also points out that the weapons attack, the firing model's unit has moved. So it's not, so it used to be that if you had 5 dudes and 1 las cannon, if the 4 dudes moved but the las cannon didn't move, he could still not get the penalty, but now he would. So the whole unit has to not move in order for the heavy weapons in that unit to not get the penalty. All right, there you go. That's the only little change that I saw there. Big guns, blast weapons, all previewed here. And so there was a big argument today about, okay, so if you have a D6 shooting weapon, it's now blast. Basically, there's a big list of blast weapons now. You're going to look it up and find your weapon. And so it would be a min 3 shots, okay, against 6+, and then 6 shots against 11+. So if you have a D3, it would be 3 shots, okay? And what was clarified today by some of the testers is that if you have 2D3 or 3D3 or 4D3 or whatever, however many D3, it is 3 shots and 3 shots and 3 shots and 3 shots. So a 4D3 Thunderfire would shoot 12 shots against 11+ model unit. Okay? There you go. Some people are arguing that actually the English says that as 2D3, you would only get 3 shots or 4 shots or whatever. So anyway, that is actually just what it is. Objective markers. Okay, yeah, we're going to get to that. Don't worry. Okay, so that's blast weapons. Attacks. Yep, that's all the same. Okay, I don't think we knew this, but the wound modifiers are also capped at +1, -1. So to hit and to wound are all capped. I'm not sure if we knew that, but it is. Allocate attacks, saving throws, inflicting hit rolls, blah, blah, blah. That's all basically the same. And specifically call out here that feel no pains, you have to pick 1. If you have 2, okay. Heroic intervention is now a sub-phase of the charge phase. So it's no longer end of the charge phase. It's charge phase and then heroic intervention phase. They're probably going to FAQ stooping dive to say it happens during the heroic intervention part of the charge phase, or they should FAQ that. That's probably when it does happen. So heroic intervention has its own little sub-phase now. And it can no longer heroic if you are in engagement range. So previously, if you weren't based, you could still heroic, but now you can no longer do that. So that little shenanigans, which was a bit janky, is no longer available. There you go. Okay. The other thing to to mention, and this is how it was before, but I just want to point it out to people because it's no change. It's the same as it was before. When you heroically intervene, you just need to move closer to the closest model. You do not need to get into engagement range. Okay? You don't have to end up in combat. So remember that, because that could come in handy at some point to do something else, like get on an objective or something, right? Just putting a single OBSEC character onto an objective can be enough sometimes to grab you that objective in your opponent's phase, and they thought they had it, and now they can't do anything about it. So just remember that. You don't have to move into engagement when you heroically intervene. Okay. Okay, is the fly nerf in charging still applies? You can only move over models and not terrain or buildings. That's no different than it was in 8th now. Overwatch, okay. Fight phase. Okay, so one of the things I don't think we talked about yet on Custodes Tactica, but has been known for a week or so now, is that your enemy chooses the first non-charging fighter. So chargers go first, and then normally the person whose turn it is would pick the first non-charging unit to fight, but now it's your opponent. Okay, this is significant. This will play into your decision of whether you pull your units out of combat in your turn, like fall back. This will also play into your decision, depending on who's stuck in combat, right? So if you're stuck in combat after your opponent charges you and you're still alive, then probably you want to stay in combat because you can attack first anyway, like on your opponent's turn. Like, there's permutations of it. You should have that now. You have to change how you think about that for units that are stuck in combat, okay? So that is a small but significant change. And it's not that it's good or bad. I think it just depends on the situation. But for us who are generally good at combat, if we're able to fight first, it's generally a good thing for us. Whereas if you're crappy in combat and you're not going to get to go first, you probably don't want to do that. Okay. All right, so who can fight? Okay, so this is a little bit of a change here, which I personally don't like just because it makes it overly complicated, and it doesn't need to be, I don't feel. But we'll see how it plays. I have not played it. So you can fight if you charged and or you are within engagement range with an enemy unit. So that's within 1 inch of an enemy unit or within 5 vertical. Okay? Now, it's not clear exactly. I mean, do you measure vertical like this? Or does this count as vertical? Right? This is where some needs clarifying, right? So if I have a base, okay, and then I have a dude who's here, I'm outside of 1 inch horizontally, but I'm well within 5 inch vertically if you measure on a tangent. Right? Needs clarifying. Because unless you're standing on a rune directly on top of somebody, the purely vertical, right? So what happens when you start to go anywhere in that 90-degree arc, right? That's not clear. So if they mean that it's a 5 inch by 1 inch box, and if you're anywhere in this box, you are in engagement range, fine, but they should clarify that. If it is in fact a 3D box of 5 inch by 1 inch, and you're anywhere in this box, then that's fine. I just need to understand what it means. So anyway, so if you're engagement range, you can fight. If you charge, you can fight. If you are second rank, okay, so if you're not in engagement range, you can only fight if you are within 1/2 inch of another model in your unit that is within 1/2 inch of an enemy. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing because they've changed now. The front row can fight if they're in engagement range, but the second row can only fight if the first row is within half. So you need to kind of be able to pile in a little bit closer. So that's a little bit of a change. No more kind of stretching dudes who can attack like four inches on the other side of the combat. So you need to be able to remember that it's a shorter distance for the second row. So it's going to be just if you're playing ranks of things and just push them all in, right? there's a lot less movement jank now, so there's no wrapping or any movement jank like that. So there's not a lot of reason anymore, maybe, to not always like base. So anyway, so you will work that out. So that's a change to who can attack in the combat phase. Okay. Okay. Another change is that chargers can attack models that have heroically intervened. So they call that out specifically. You can declare attacks against units that you've declared a charge on, or models that have heroically intervened. Whereas before, if you didn't declare the character who intervened, you can't attack them. They're just there to wail on you for free. But now you can hit them if they intervene into you. So that's a change. So be careful where you intervene, peeps. And the other thing they've pointed out now, and this is another way of cutting down on the wrap, is you're no longer allowed to hit people just with your fist if you have melee weapons, which everybody has, basically. So no longer can you choose to just use your fist and put your power fist aside so that you don't kill a guardsman. You cannot do that anymore. It's against the rules. So that's just another, thing they've done to get rid of wrapping, basically, because that was sometimes important to be able to wrap something. You don't want to kill that guardsman, right? Okay. Morale phase. Okay, morale phase has changed. So now you take a morale check as normal. Number of models dead plus D6. You roll a dice. If you're less than your morale leadership, you pass. Nothing else happens. Same as before. If you do not pass that morale, now you automatically lose one model. So that's good because before you lose more models automatically. But now you do combat attrition. And for every model left in your unit, you roll a d6. Any ones, they're gone. You lose models. And if you're at half strength, sorry, I gotta read that again. Half strength. Where's the half strength thing? Oh, attrition there. Oh yeah, you're extra -1 if you're half strength. So if you're at or below half strength, so basically the total number of models in your unit divided in half, now you're actually on a 1 or 2, you're losing models. So this is, I think this doesn't affect Custodes too much. We're rarely running units and losing so many models where we would need to actually fail a morale test. And the banner, remember, lets you re-roll. But if you do, it's just gonna hurt. But it hurt before to fail morale. So overall, for us, not a big deal. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt big units, obviously, or like elite units of like 10 man, because then you're gonna if you do fail, you're gonna feel it more. The attrition, you'll feel the attrition more. So. Yeah, so I think that is a important change to morale. It definitely maybe makes minus leadership things a little bit more pointy, but you still have to fail the morale, and that has not changed. So in the same way that those rules didn't affect morale much in 8th, it doesn't seem like those rules are going to affect morale much in 9th either, because you still have to fail the morale test to start with before you get the attrition, and the leadership stuff doesn't affect the attrition roll. So yeah, so I actually don't, they said that all these leadership things are going to have a bigger role. It doesn't seem like it's going to be. It doesn't seem like anything has changed from that point of view, but anyway, attrition could hurt. Okay, coherency. Okay, so coherency is a big deal. So coherency is still 2 inches horizontally or 5 inches vertically, okay? And if you're 5 or less models in a unit, it's exactly the same coherency as it's always been. If you are 6 or more models in a unit now, you must be coherent to 2 other models. Okay? That's big. So if you go from 5 models in your unit to 6 models in the unit, you've just decreased the footprint of your unit significantly. You basically have to go in V's Okay, or you have to stand like base to base if your bases are small enough that you're always like crosswise like that. So no more conga lining. Okay, and that's exactly what they wanted to do to get rid of conga lining. So that's an interesting breakpoint at the 5 to 6. I feel like they could have made it like 10 to 11 or something, or 11 plus. Like 5 to 6 is it punishes a lot of units that I don't feel needed to be punished for this. Like, yeah, but yeah. So I think it is what it is. We have to learn to live with it. You're going to have to be a little bit more compact in how you play your units. Now, why is this important? Okay, well, one thing is you can't move if you're out of coherency. Okay, same as before, no big deal. But after the morale check, now you have to make a unit coherency check. Okay, and so what this is now everything that's not in coherency, you gotta pull. Those models are gone. Gone. They don't count as killed or anything. They're just gone. Okay, they've run away until you have a single group of completely coherent models. So you better be careful where you pull your casualties. You got to be careful where you pull your casualties. If you take multiple models now out of coherency, they will all suddenly disappear on you until everything is back in coherency. Now, I'm assuming that as you pull and you get down to 5 models now your coherency just goes back to being within 1. Doesn't specifically say that, but I assume that would be the case. That's how everybody's playing it. So if you've messed it up, you could be pulling all your models down to like 5 models, which is pretty harsh. So don't mess it up. All right, just get used to measuring your coherencies carefully. This obviously affects Custodes. We like to run larger hammer units over 5 models. I don't think this necessarily means now we only run 5-man units, because that's really, really bad for CP efficiency, and not really, we're not an MSU army. But it just means you have to be careful with your coherency, and you can no longer spread your guys out as far as you would like, which does hurt us in terms of coverage of the field. It is what it is. But I don't think it means we now all just start running, MSU. For our CPs alone is reason enough to still bring larger units. But if you're deciding between bringing a 5-man unit and a 6-man unit, I would just bring the 5-man unit now. So if you're bringing Guardians and you're deciding between 5 and a 6-man because you had like 50-something points left at the end of the unit, then don't bring the 6-man. Bring just the 5-man. End up covering more space with less models. So that is what I would do for it. If you want to bring a hammer of 8 and 9 Alaris Terminators, then bring your 8 or 9 Alaris Terminators. Better than bringing 5 and 4. But if you're deciding between 5 and 6, just bring 5. Okay. Cool. Let's go into actions. So actions basically it tells you what you need to do. Okay, and the rule is generally, unless it says multiple units can do it, only one unit can do it. And when it finishes really depends on the action. So there's no kind of hard and fast rules. But when you're doing an action, you can't do anything except fight. Okay, so you can fight if you're doing an action, i.e. you can defend yourself if you get attacked and you're still trying to complete your action. Okay, which is cool. So it's not quite like sappers. You can do actions with characters, and it basically means for the duration of the action, their aura turns off. So that could be important or not important depending on the situation. So if you just have a shield captain sitting on the back doing an action and nobody's near him, then his aura's turned off, no big deal. But keep that in mind. If you have an action, if you're trying to do one of the actions that are near the middle and your whole army's around it, and you got your Vexilla doing an action, now your Vexilla aura turns off until the action is completed. So that's important. All right, don't forget that. All right. Okay, psychic actions are basically, instead of casting, the psyker does this action, and they roll 2d6 as if like they were manifesting a power. What's not clear is if it actually counts as manifesting. Like, can you deny it? Like it says you can deny it, but I mean in terms of our stratagems that allow us to deny on a 3+ or a 4+. Our own stratagem that allows us to deny on a 4+ doesn't work because our unit has to be targeted for that, and you're not being targeted for the action, so that's fine. Our stratagem to roll a deny obviously works, and the sister one is not clear. I have to read it again. I have it right here. Oh, I don't have it here. Anyway, so it's not clear to see whether that would, you could use that stratagem to auto-deny somebody from scoring an action, which would be pretty sweet. So that just needs to be clarified a little bit. Okay. Okay, we're on to missions. We'll go over the missions when we talk about missions. We're going to talk about the building and army section now. So you cannot shoot when you cannot attack with ranged attack when you're doing an action. You can fight though. So the only thing you can do is fight. Okay, so building an army is pretty much as we have learned. Okay, same as. So this has caused a little bit of controversy today. So there's a little box here about gaining and refunding CP, and it says basically you can get 1 per battle round, and you cannot gain more than 1 per battle round. The only exception to that obviously is that 1 free CP you get for free. You get that, and you can still refund. What it has taken out of this paragraph, the exceptions, so moment shackle exception, all the other exceptions, and the statement that stratagems still can refund you more than 1 CP. So it's interesting that they took that out. Either they intended to take it out, and those things all fall under the envelope now of 1 CP max, or they're intending to put it in either in an FAQ or in the grand tournament rules, of which we don't know. So don't panic for now. If the moment shackle does become nerfed to 1 CP, I think that is another nail in Trajan's coffin. But I suspect that those exceptions will all come back because there's a bunch of stratagems that do it too. It's just those exceptions will come into the grand tournament rules. Okay. All right. So army buildings basically, so the 3 detachment limit is still there. Basically, if you're buying 3 detachments, you probably run out of CP anyway. Nothing there has really changed. Okay, so they have confirmed that the brigade is 4 CP and otherwise unchanged, and you get your 4 back, obviously. So the Vanguard, the Outrider, and the Spearhead are 3 CP, so I see hard for us to play Vanguard now. I think we're playing around now between the Battalion and Double Patrol. I think 3 CP is just a lot to pay for that detachment now. And the other thing to note is that you have 3 detachments and there's no air wing detachment. Therefore, the max number of flyers you can see now on the field will be 6 flyers, 2 in each detachment, and they will have paid for the cheapest, which is a patrol, 4 extra CP for the honor of taking 6 flyers. So there you go, as well as paying like troop tax. So there you go. 6 flyers is the max. Okay, and then we're on to the Supreme Command. So Supreme Command basically seems like it's a detachment designed to allow you to play Primarchs. So it says specifically Primarch, Demon Primarch, and Supreme Commander units only, and it's 0 CP. And when you take one of these, then you get your core detachment. You get CP that refunds your core detachment, because these people also have to be your warlord. So if you play Magnus, you run him in the Supreme Command, he has to be your warlord, and you get 3 CP back for your battalion or whatever you chose to play. So fine. This was better than having to pay 3 CP in the Super Heavy Ox to run, Morty or Magnus. For others who don't have Primarchs or Demon Primarchs, we just wonder what Supreme Commanders are. So either every army will get a Supreme Commander, in which case it would be like Trajan or, Creed or like a Chapter Master or whatever. fine. It seems doesn't help you very much. It just allows you to refund, which you would anyway. Your warlord is now stuck to a most times named character where you cannot choose the warlord trait, and you have to take an extra HQ in your patrol or battalion now. So it seems like actually not useful in that case. This may be a placeholder keyword for the future. So the Silent King is probably going to be a Supreme Commander. And there may be more Primarchs or Supreme Commanders released with the new books and in 9th. I suspect that's the case, that nobody's going to get Supreme Commander necessarily just added on. But it's a keyword for the future. Who knows? Okay, Super Heavy Detachment, of course, is the same. Super Heavy Ox. So this is 3 CP to just run a single Lord of War. And I think this makes it pretty hard to bring single Lords of War, like Splash a Knight or like Splash a Baneblade or something. I think this makes it pretty prohibitive to cost 3 CP just to do that. Okay, Fortifications cost you 1 CP, and you get it back as long as the fortifications are the same faction as your Warlord's detachment, which probably they would be. So this will allow us to bring 1 to 3 fortifications. I personally hate fortifications. I hope that not every army is just getting a free fortification. Not free, but like, I personally hate fortifications. But anyway, I think it's kind of stupid. Like, you bring your own building to like battle. So yeah. So who knows? And somebody asked me, what would Custodes fortification be? No idea. It's not gonna be like. I hope it's not. So maybe it's just this, but gold. Maybe on a stupid pedestal too, like this. First who knows? But yeah, who knows? I have no idea. Okay, and the auxiliary support, of course, is still there, but now it costs you 2 CP. You rarely saw auxiliary supports before, and now you will totally not see it. Okay, now, George is in the chat, and I know that this is his favorite change in 9th Ed. So, on this page, where 251, which says Battle-Forged Army Rosters, basically, they have spelled out everything that you need to put on your army list now. And that includes basically everything. So you have to put marks, warlord traits, relics, stratagems that upgrade things, stratagems that give you extra relics and warlord traits, specialist detachments. All of this now needs to go. Psychic powers that you pick. You can apparently determine random ones, but that you pick, no. All the stuff must go on your list now. And this is actually repeated in the mission book, the match play mission book. So, there it is. Now, that doesn't mean that independent tournaments are not going to change that and allow you to change per game. This is not a law. You don't have to follow this. But if you're playing GW and you're following all of GW's rules, this is now and may become the standard. We'll see. If all the big tournaments that are playing GW stuff, LVO and all those guys, if they mandate this because they're following GW rules, then probably most tournaments will follow the same. So it's really their lead that's going to determine whether this becomes the standard or not. Okay. Stratagems. Okay. So the first, these are talking about the core stratagems that everybody can use, of which there's more now. So the command reroll, 1 CP. This now very specifically states what you can use it for. Okay, so hit roll, wound roll, damage roll, saving throw, advance roll, the charge roll, psychic test, deny the witch, or re-roll the dice to determine number of attacks. And you re-roll that roll, test, or saving throw. Okay? So, if you rolled 2d6 to make a charge roll, your command using your CP re-roll now re-rolls the 2d6. not 1 dice. So there you go. Okay, so that's a big change. Okay, if you roll a psychic test to manifest the power and you want to re-roll, you can no longer just re-roll the 1 dice. You have to re-roll the whole test. Okay, so this is a big change. Okay, and also this this stops all they don't have to FAQ that mission rolls don't count and all these other rolls and you know, sisters powers and all that stuff. It tells you specifically what you can use this for. Obviously for us this is pretty good for re-rolling charges, like Dread Host re-rolling 3d6. I mean, you know, this is good for us, but yeah, it can be bad too if we're trying to deny a power and we just need to re-roll 1 dice. We have to re-roll both now, so you know, it can be both ways, but you know, it's been changed. Okay, the cut them down stratagem we knew already. Desperate Breakout we knew, so this is the stratagem that lets people end up out of wraps. So wrapping is basically a thing of the past. If you can carry out a wrap, then still do it because you'll force your opponent to spend 2 CP basically. But basically, there's between this and coherency checks, there's so many ways of getting out of a wrap now. You can no longer rely on wrapping as a way to avoid firepower. Luckily, we have stratagems to take less damage now, but and then how you have to be coherent too. I think wrapping is going to be extremely difficult, and that was exactly what they wanted to do. So yeah, no big deal. Okay, the other emergency disembarkation we already talked about. Overwatch is a stratagem now, and counteroffensive, the interrupt is still there. So that's 2 CP. Okay, insane bravery, which is the auto pass morale for 2 CP, is now once per battle. This is great. Doesn't affect us really, because we'll just spend CP to like reroll the morale, and it's rare that we will actually have to fail morale, although it's still annoying to me that we can fail morale. But for other armies that keep just spending 2 CP to save their units, 1 time only. So this is good. Okay, so next is strategic reserves. So strategic reserves is basically units that are not normally able to deep strike or outflank. You can put any unit now into strategic reserve by spending CP. And the table is basically less than 10 points is 1 CP, 10 to 20 is 2 CP, 20 to 30 is 3 CP, etc. So if you want to deep strike Magnus or outflank Magnus, it will cost you 3 CP to do that. Boom. And then when they go off, and if they go off, if you have a way of getting them off after the game has started, they can now come on anytime before the end of the game, not by turn 3. But if they start the game off of the field, they have to come on by turn 3. And then you can set them up based on this complicated table that they have, which people have already seen. Basically, in the second turn, you can outflank, but not in your enemy zone. In the third turn, you can outflank other than your opponent's deployment edge, and then so on. And then at any time, you can come into your own zone within 1 inch of your own board edge, but you can go straight into combat. So that's kind of cool. Okay. And aircraft cannot crash anymore. If they cannot make their minimum move, they just go into strategic reserve. So you cannot crash an airplane anymore by blocking their move. Obviously, if they fly off the table, they also go into strategic reserve, and they are allowed to come back within 9 inches or on the table edge. So there you go. Okay, terrain. Okay. Let's take a drink. Some Telemon pouring in the break. Okay. I don't want to spend too much time talking about terrain. If you read the terrain rules, it is very confusing at first because now they've introduced all these traits, and then each terrain piece has a bunch of traits, and that's just for the typical terrain pieces. Then there's 4 categories of terrain, which really kind of doesn't matter because people are going to be choosing ruins or whatever. And basically, they play pretty similar to what they used to be. Big differences are First of all, there's light and dense cover. Okay, so light cover gives you +1 against save against ranged attack, and dense gives you +1 save against melee attack. Okay, that's one difference. The other thing is, if something is defensible, like ruins, now if you're in the ruin, you can either overwatch on a 5-up or no overwatch and +1 to hit in combat if somebody charges you. So that's the defensible side of the ruins, okay? So what is it? Let's just take a ruin, for example. So what is a ruin now? A ruin has a bunch of traits, okay? And a ruin is, you know, like a ruin, okay? Versus ruined walls, which is just like a little bits of wall, okay, which you don't really see very often. But if we're talking ruins, like we're used to playing with ruins, this is what ruins are now. So ruins are scalable. What that means is infantry, beasts, and swarms and fly can move up and down and end on the top levels. So that's the same, okay? They've just integrated all those kind of rules into this word scalable. They're breachable. That means that infantry, beasts, and swarms can move through it as if it wasn't there. Okay, that is, again, what we're used to playing with ruins. It's just given it a name now. It's called breachable. Okay, it gives light cover. So this gives you +1 armor save against ranged attacks. So again, already did that before, but now it's just called light cover. It's defensible, which is maybe the only new part of the ruin rules, other than obscuring, I guess. And so that is what I said, overwatch or +1 hit. And then it is obscuring. So here's the jank with obscuring. So here's the ruin, okay? And my models are behind the ruin. So if I'm behind the ruin but not in the ruin, this becomes a complete, and it's over 5 inches tall. This becomes a complete wall. No windows, no nothing. You cannot see me, okay? Unless you can draw a line that doesn't go over or through the ruin, okay? However, the minute you go into the ruin, now all these windows and doors open up, and if you can see me, you can see me, okay? So that's weird. But at the end of the day, all you're going to have to do as TOs, or with your own terrain at home, is just block up all your windows and doors. And now it behaves like a ruin that you've always known. Except also blocks line of sight if you're standing behind it, which it does anyway if you block all the windows and doors. So the short story is block all your windows and doors, and then you have the old school ruins back. Okay. That's basically it. Everything else is kind of the same or not that important. Hills and stuff, the craters and stuff like that. Forests and craters still give you cover and -2 to charge. So those things have not changed. They just gave those things names. So that's all I really want to talk about in terms of terrain. Yeah. But do read those rules. There's a lot of it, and it's confusing at first, but you'll get it. Okay. So that is the rule book covered. If you're looking for the official rules, go to Warhammer community website. Okay. Now let's talk about the mission pack. The mission pack for match play is called Eternal War, okay? Which is confusing, but for those coming new to the game, it won't be confusing at all. But it's called Eternal War. And then our missions are called... the type of game we're playing at 2,000 points is called Strike Force. So these are Eternal War Strike Force missions. There are missions for Combat Patrol. There are missions of Eternal War for Incursion. And there are missions Eternal War for Onslaught, which are all the different sizes of games. So we want Eternal War Strike Force missions. Okay. So what does it tell us to do? Okay. So first it says select the battle size, 2,000 points. Muster your armies, blah, blah, blah. And then it says here, again, repeated, that you have to put all this stuff on your army lists. Okay? Here is the rule where they have put here the rule about Chaos, Imperium, Eldari, and Nari not being the common keywords for your things. No understrength, blah, blah, blah. Okay, same as before. And then they point out here that reinforcements are anything that you need points to play, blah, blah, blah. Then it points out here the FAQ about all the demon princes all being the same data sheet, and there's 3 of each. And also points out here that take away cult and brood brothers, and those all count as the same data sheet as well. So that's all just integrating FAQs, which I really like. Okay. So then it gives you the table of the missions, mission briefing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so after you read the mission, then you're supposed to place your objective markers. All the missions are set objective markers, and these missions. So whatever. Then you create the battlefield, and it's supposed to be player set up. There's supposed to be a guidelines detailed on pages that we do not have, but it sounds like it's supposed to be like 1 piece of terrain for every 12 by 12 square. And then it sets you the required minimum battlefield size, which we know already. Okay, then you pick secondaries. There are 5 categories of secondaries, and you're supposed to pick 3 and only 1 from each category. Okay, and each secondary will be worth 15 points. So all your secondaries are worth 45 points max in total at the end of the game. And then each secondary scores them differently. So we'll come to that. Then you roll off, and the winner chooses if they're the attacker or the defender. The defender chooses the deployment zone and then starts to deploy, and it's alternating deployment. So I was really hoping it wasn't going to be alternating. That's my less favorite of the 2 types. I much prefer all or nothing, and it's just faster and allows you to adjust things. So anyway, it seems like they've gone for the alternating deployment in these missions. It may be different for the grand tournament missions, so we can hold out hope. But these rulebook Eternal War missions, it's alternating. And then you're supposed to declare all your reserves and reinforcements and things in transports in secret, and then you reveal them, which is interesting. So normally you're like, okay, I'm going to deep strike this, I'm going to deep strike this. When you're doing your deployment, you decide to do it or not. But this says before you deploy, you're supposed to choose it all, write it down, and then reveal it. So that's interesting. For us, a lot of the times, we already know and it's not a big deal. But for some armies, it can make a big difference. Okay. Okay, so then you deploy, and it's alternating deployment, as I already said. And then you roll again to determine who picks first or second. And the winner of the roll determines first or second. So again, it's gone backwards to like so many rolls and things. So hopefully the GT missions will be a little bit different. Okay, and then there's a little paragraph here about conceding. If both players agree to end the battle, you just end the battle there, total up your points, and that's it. If only one player wants to end, then they remove all their models, they get 0, and the other player can just keep playing by themselves. So there you go. Okay, and then the funny thing here is, and hopefully this won't be in the GT pack, but it may, 45 points for primary, 45 points for secondary. That takes you to 90 out of 100. And then the final 10 points are given to you depending if you have painted your army to battle ready capitalized standard, up to a max of 100 points. So there you go. That's caused some people to be upset, and whatever. I mean, it's 10 points at the end of the day. Okay. So let's go over the secondaries. So there's 5 categories of secondaries. There's Purge the Enemy, which is mostly like the killing. There's No Mercy, No Respite, which is a little bit of killing. There's there's Battlefield Supremacy, which is all your hold objectives. There's Shadow Operations, which involve actions. And then there's Warcraft, which is kind of Psyker and Anti-Psyker secondaries. Okay, so those are the 5 categories. You have to pick 3, only 1 from each. So what I've done is I've gone through each one talked about it a little bit. And then for us, I've kind of given a rating as to whether I think it's good or bad for us, whether it's easy or bad for us to deny, and also if you pick it, what you could expect to get out of it based on what the missions look like. Okay, so this is with these missions in mind. Okay, so in Purge the enemy. So the first one is Assassinate, which we've seen already. This is basically Headhunter. You get 3 victory points for each character that you killed at the end of the game. So this is okay. It is just like Headhunter was, a situational one that you pick depending on who you're playing against, how many characters they have, and how they intend to use those characters. With the oncoming of Alaris, it may be easier to score Assassinate now. And keep in mind, though, that you need 5 characters to max this. So really, you're looking, it seems like my impression of all the secondaries is that it may be difficult to max most of them. So you're not really aiming for 45 points. Just like aiming for 45 points is probably like aiming for a 42 or a 41 in ITC, okay, in terms of doableness. So I would say that 9 to 12 on this is killing 3 to 4 characters, so that's what you're aiming for, about a 12 probably at the most. But you could get lucky if they're very aggressive characters, you get your 15. So that's a decent one to pick depending on the matchup. The next one is called Bring It Down. This is basically Big Game Hunter. And basically, you get, for vehicles or monsters, you get victory points. For killing them, if there are 10 wounds or less, you get 2 victory points for each. If it's 11 plus wounds, you get 3 victory points each. This means, to max this, you need to kill 5 big vehicles or monsters, or 8 small ones. 8. Which is a lot. So this is going to be hard to max. You're probably looking at getting 9 to 12 on this. Okay, 3 to 4 bigger tanks, or maybe like less if it's smaller tanks. I would suggest not taking this at all if it's all tanks less than 10 wounds. But if it's 11 plus vehicles and monsters, then maybe you're talking about 3 or 4 old school. So like 9 to 12 points out of 15 on this, okay? Be pretty hard for our army to max this. Similarly, we don't really give this up very easily at all unless you're playing all mech. And if you're playing all mech, then it depends what mech you buy, what mech you're playing. If you're playing Palace tanks, this is going to be very hard to max. But then if you max a combination of Caladius tanks and Palace tanks, you could probably get up there pretty easily. A few Palace tanks and 2 Caladius tanks, that's already 12 points right there. So there you go. Okay, the next one is Titan Slayers, which is basically killing Titanics. You get 10 points for killing a Titanic model and 15 points for killing 2. So this is a good secondary versus Knights. We can kill 2 Knights. And at least 10 for killing 1 Knight. So this is within how you would want to play that matchup. So this is a good secondary if you're playing against Knights. Or if you're going to see triple Shadow Sword lists, or you're not going to see Marty Morty Bash Brother lists anymore, but those kind of lists, mostly Knights. So if you're playing against Knights, this is a decent pick. Slay the Warlord. So Slay the Warlord is just, if you kill the Warlord, you get 6 victory points. So this is really not a good one. You can get max 6 out of 15 on this. And often it's hard to slay the Warlord. So this is like a lot of effort for very little reward. So I would avoid Slay the Warlord. And if somebody picks this against you, then that's great, because you can easily deny it. And even if they get it, it's only 6 points. Okay, so my general thoughts about these Purge secondaries. We deny these pretty hard. We don't have Titans unless you play mech. We don't have vehicles. Slaying our Warlord is hard. It only gives up 6 points. And usually we're running now, 3 characters. So now we're talking only 9 points on that secondary. So we deny the Purge category pretty well. Carnier asks, what do I think of Death Jesters and Sorcerers cleaving units with cohesion? Yeah, I think that's a thing. Death Jesters is a thing. Split your unit and you lose some. You have to remember, if you're playing those people, you need to keep that in mind. Okay, so we deny the Purge category pretty good. and we can score most of these okay. So Purge is good for us to pick and bad for your opponent to pick. All right, let's move on to No Mercy, No Respite category, which they made the name shorter. Okay. So number one is thin their ranks. So basically, this is the new Reaper, but basically you get a point, like a tally, 1 for each model you kill. Each model, not wounds. It's gone back to models. If it's a 10 wound model, you get 10 points for that. And you add it all up at the end of the game and divide by 10, and that's how many VPs you get. I.e., in order to get 15 points on this secondary, you need to kill 150 models. That's a lot. It's hard for us to do. It's hard for most people to do. That is a lot. And so this, you're not going to max this very easily. If you're talking most armies like 60 to 80 models, then you're only going to get 6 to 8 points on this. So it's not a great secondary for us to pick. However, we deny this hard. We got, 15 models? You're going to get 1, round up 2 VP for this. So nobody's going to be picking this against us. So we deny this hard. Okay. But it's going to be hard for us to get that one. Okay, the next one is Attrition. 4 victory points if you killed more enemy units than were lost. So this is kill more, basically. If you kill more, you get 4 VPs. So that's pretty good. We already play kill more game pretty well, and it's even harder to kill us now, and we're more killy. So I think this is actually a great secondary for us, because we can kill more, we can do kill more, and that's 4 VP, so we only have to score this 3 times to get a respectable score of 12, or if we score 4, then we're talking full points. So I think this is actually a good secondary for us to pick, and we actually kind of deny it because that's just how we are. That's our army. So I think this is good on both sides for us. Okay, next one is While We Stand, We Fight. So this is very interesting. So before the battle, you have to pick the 3 most expensive models in your army, points-wise. Now, it's not clear whether if you have a unit of Alaris, whether then you just pick 1 Alaris Terminator, but probably in the end, you're picking your single model. So for us, it would be like the Telemon, Shield Captains, Trajan, right? Those are our 3 most expensive single models. Or if you're running mech, then, Orion or, stuff like that. And basically, if they're still alive at the end of the game, you get points. So you get 5 points, victory points at the end of the game for every model that's still on the battlefield and alive at the end of the game. So, can we score this? So say my list, Telemon and 2 Shield Captains on bikes. Yeah, we could. The Telemon's pretty hard to kill now, as are the Shield Captains, unless you're over-aggressive with them. Could easily get 10 to 15 points on this without doing anything other than not dying. So that's pretty good. So I would say this is a respectable one to pick. Is this better than picking the Killmore one? I guess it depends on your opponent, because you can only pick 1 in each category. But this is one we can consider. Do we deny this? Hard to know. Depends what their 3 models are. I think you just have to... it really just depends on your opponent's army if we can deny it or not. So hard to say. But this is a decent secondary. Okay, and the last one in this category is First Strike. Basically, you score 5 points if you killed something, if you get First Strike, and additional 3 points if you killed more in the first battle round. So again, this is too hard to do things in the first round when a lot of people will just be hiding because you can't score primary in the first round. And so for 8-point max. So this is probably a bad secondary to pick and super easy to deny. So I don't think people are going to be taking this very often. So for the same reason people didn't pick Old School, they won't pick that secondary. Okay, so general thoughts on this category. So these are all pretty deniable by us, and two of them are pretty good doable by us. So I think this is actually a good category. Definitely don't go for thin the ranks. I would go for either the while we stand we fight or the attrition. Okay. Battlefield supremacy. That is the third category. These are the holding type secondaries. So number 1, engage all fronts. This is basically the new recon that was spoiled. So if you're in 3 quarters, you get 2 VP. If you're in all 4 quarters, you get 4 VP, and you must be over 6 inches away from the middle of the field. So I think that change, 6 inches away from the middle of the field, for a footless makes this difficult to score. Recon was okay before because we could stand in the middle and score all 4 quarters like that, but now it becomes more difficult. So I think this is like a, and you have to do it to max this out. You need to be in all 4 quarters for all 5 turns, which is really hard. Our army just does not do that. So this is automatically a 9-pointer, maybe a 12, but 9-pointer probably. So not the best for us. If you're playing bikes, Venatari, Palace tanks, you might have 9 to 12 points from this. But, without giving up units, you're not going to get the max on this. So I would say this is a, second rank pick for us. Do we deny this? Only in that we like to stand in the middle and kill things. But it may be hard for us to deny this, just like it is usually hard to deny things like recon. Okay, the next is Linebreaker, which is the same. 2 enemy units wholly in your opponent's enemy for 4 VP. And it's at the end of your turn it's scored. So not something that we usually do, so I would avoid this one. And the last one is Domination. So this is basically modified hold more. You score 3 victory points if you control more than half of the opponents, more than half of the objective markers. So it's not hold more than your opponent. You have to actually hold more than half of all the objectives, regardless of how many your opponents hold. So I think this is doable depending on the missions. Having looked at the missions now, I think this is actually quite hard for us to do. So I would avoid this one. And even if you score it every turn, you have to do that 5 turns in a row to max it out. So maybe you'll get 1 or 2 turns where you do that at the end of the game when you're already dominating, and so you end up scoring like 6 points on this. So it's probably not a good one. But if you treat this as a turn 4 or 5 ground control, you're talking like 6 points. Okay, so overall thoughts on the battlefield supremacy is that they're all actually pretty hard for us to do. I don't see us picking these very often, the holding type secondaries. Okay, the next category is shadow operations. So this is where you start getting into the actions now to do secondaries. So the first one is called Investigate Sites. Basically, infantry, not character, does this at the end of the movement phase if they're within 6 inches of the center, excluding aircraft, and no enemy are within 6 inches of the center. And you complete it at the end of your turn for 3 victory points. So this is very doable. If we are going to camp the middle, you just make sure you're holding a 6-inch circle and you're denying people coming in, and you get a chance to heroic and stuff to stop people getting in. And this is pretty doable. Just park a guardian squad there and just stay there till the end of your turn. So, you perform this at the end of your movement phase, and you actions completed at the end of the turn. So your opponent really doesn't get much to do about it. So this is actually pretty easy to score at least 4 on, 4 turns other than the first turn. And so that's a good secondary for 12 points. Can we deny this? For sure. We just hit the middle and take them off the middle. So it's good for us to deny as well. So that's a good secondary. The next one is Repair Teleport Homer. This scores 5 victory points, but your unit An infantry unit has to perform this action at the end of the movement phase if they're wholly within the opponent's deployment zone, and they have to still be there at the end of your next. So they have to survive a battle round in your opponent's deployment zone. Now, that can be easy or hard. I feel like you're really going out of your way to park a unit there, like maybe a shield captain or something, and trying to survive. I don't really like this one. You only have to do it 3 turns, but you have to do it 3 turns. We just don't have... I think this is... Yeah, it's just not something that we can accomplish, I don't think, very easily. So, I'll skip it. And then the next one, of course, is Raise the Banners, which we've all heard. And this is kind of like modified engineers. So you can have multiple infantry units raising the banner. They have to survive at the end of your command phases. So they raise the banner, and that banner raising is done at the end of your turn. And then they can leave. And so you put a little command banner on each one that you've tagged, and at the end of each command phase, you get points for each one that you have command of, a banner on, and at the end of the game, you get a victory point for each one that's still yours. So this is kind of like engineers, but you don't have to sit on there the whole game. So I kind of like this one, actually. You've got a couple of shield units or 3 shield units. You could rack up these points pretty easily. So let's say if you score it, 1 to 2 victory points, 1 or 2 objectives like this every turn, that's say 10 points, and then another 2 to 3 at the end of the game. That's giving you anywhere from 12 to 14 VPs. So that's a pretty good secondary. And so I think just like we would pick engineers a lot, I think this is a decent secondary to pick, Raise the Banners. So overall, for shadow operations, we have decent ones. Investigate sites and Raise the Banners kind of plays into our army strengths. So we have 2 secondaries there that we can pick from this category that we could definitely do. Okay, the final one, which is very interesting, is Warcraft. This category focuses around psychers. So it's interesting that there's a whole category focused around psychers. So mental interrogation, basically, you get 3 victory points if you do a Warp Charge 4 psychic test, basically. That's what it is. Now, to do this psychic test, your psyker has to be within 18 inches of an enemy character. So they've got to be pretty close and definitely in denial range. So we can't do this, obviously. Would you bring an Inquisitor to do this action? I guess you could, but I personally don't want to do a secondary that I have to pass a test and then I can be denied. It's 2 points of failure there to score me 3 points. And you have to do that 5 times for max. So can we deny this? For sure. Even just denying this a couple of times with a deny strat, or if you have a Calexis or Sisters or something, can put a crimp in your opponent's secondary scoring. So I think we deny this well, and it's hard for us to score this. Psychic Ritual. So this is at the end of your 15 victory points at the end of the battle, if any unit from your army successfully completed this psychic action 3 times. A Warp Charge 3 power, which is pretty easy to get off. And you have to be within certain, do that within certain number of inches of the battlefield. It is cut off, unfortunately. So I don't know. Some people say it's 9 inches from the middle. I don't know what it is. It could be anything. I presume it's got to be pretty close to the battlefield, like you're doing a ritual. So, and it's only Warp Charge 3, so it's pretty easy to get off, and you only have to do it 3 times in the game to score your max points. So can we do this? Yeah, like an Inquisitor could do this, and we could just try and protect it as best we can, and it has to get it off. Again, it has to get it off, and I know it's pretty easy to get it off, and it can be denied, right? So failure points there. Can we deny this? For sure, we can deny this power, but we can also just take the middle. So I think we hard deny this as well, and we could maybe get it off if you have an Inquisitor. If you're not playing Inquisitors, then you're not taking these 2 at all, but you can deny them. Okay, the last one is Abhor the Witch. So you cannot take this if you have a Psyker. So if you have an Inquisitor, you cannot take this. But if you don't play with Inquisitors, you can definitely take this, especially if you're playing against Psychic-heavy matchups. Eldar, Grey Knights, Chaos, Thousand Suns. Basically, score 5 points for every enemy Psyker that you killed and 3 points for Psyker units. So that's great. We just have to kill 3 Psykers and you max this. So if you're playing GK, Thousand Suns, Chaos, Eldar, take this, snipe the shit out of those characters, 3 characters, and you're done. So this is a great one to take in those matchups to almost guarantee you 15 secondary points. So it's a great one. And we deny this, obviously, because we don't have any Psychers. So, yeah. So overall, I like this category because we don't need to do them. If we have an Inquisitor, it's okay, but not ideal. But the Abhor the Witch gives us some real mission winning points against those matchups. And remember, you win the mission. So I like that a lot. Okay, so that is the secondaries. Whew, okay. Okay, now we're on to the missions. We won't spend too much time talking about the missions, but we will go through them. Now, keep in mind, I don't want to spend too much time because you know what? I have a feeling that the GT book that's coming out will have much better missions. So we'll see. Okay, so the first mission is called Retrieval. Okay, and it's basically... it's a hammer and anvil with 6 fixed objectives, and it is like this. Okay, so as you notice, the objectives are fairly far apart. The 2 middle ones are 40 inches apart, and the lateral ones are 16 inches apart. And No Man's Zone is 24 inches. So the primary with all of these missions is the same, which I don't like, but anyway. So if you hold 1 objective in the end of your command phase, you get 3 VP. 5. Yeah. So each turn, other than turn 1, you can score up to 15 primary points. Okay. And you can only score 45 max for primary. So you only have to do the primary 3 times if you max them out to score your max primary. Control 1 objective for 5 points. If you control 2 or more objectives, then you get another 5 points. If you control more objectives than your opponent, then you get your third score, so 15 points in that round. No, it's 45 points from primary, I'm pretty sure. 45, 45, and then 15, and then 10. Okay, so the primary in this mission, no, George, each secondary is 15, so it's 45 for secondaries, 45 for primaries, 10 for painting. Okay, so can we score holds in this setup? Well, we can hold 2 of these. So I think we can score, 10 primary spread over 3 or 4 turns. So we could do okay on primary, and we're probably not going to hold more, so we won't be able to stop our opponent from scoring primary. Spreading out to 3 of these is going to be pretty hard, depending on how it goes. Now, you could go to the middle here and then just leave people on the back, and so project force and control 3 that way. So you could do it by doing that, but those objectives are pretty far apart. The secondary on this mission, so each mission has a secondary that you can take instead of the standard ones. So this one basically is you have to survive. So you count up the number of units you have, that's your army strength. If you're over 75% army strength still alive at the end of the game, you max out your VP, 15. If you have over 50% of your army left, you get 10. So, I mean, it depends on the matchup. You could do that. Get 10 out of 15 on that secondary. It's an okay secondary, but it's not the best. So overall, yeah, this mission is okay. Okay, mission 2 is called Frontline Warfare. Okay, frontline warfare is Dawn of War, and it looks like this: cross-shaped like diamond objectives on a Dawn of War deployment. 1224-inch no man's land. Across each other is 32 inches apart objectives, and this way is also 32 inches. So this is really far placed objectives, and so that's difficult for us. Even if we control the middle, we probably won't be able to project enough lateral force 32 inches apart to hold those two on the side. So we're really just holding one. Even if we skew and try and hold these two, I don't know what the hypotenuse of 16 and 16 is, but 16 probably. And so that is okay to hold two. So yeah, the primary is harder for us on this mission. The secondary that you can do here is at the end of your command phase, you score 3 victory points if you control the objective marker in your opponent's deployment zone, and 2 victory points for each of the no man's land, for a max of 7 victory points. So you can only score 7 victory points, so you have to do this 3 times the max, or if you do it twice, that's 14 out of 15. So, but you have to hit your opponents or both the ones in the middle. So I think this is actually pretty hard for us to do unless we're just rolling through, and then it doesn't really matter what secondary pick. So this mission is not great for us. Frontline warfare, mission number 2. Okay, mission 3 is the 4 pillars. This was the previewed mission, and so basically this is table quarters. Okay, table quarters with the 9-inch circle of exclusion in the middle. And the 4 pillars or objectives are 10 inches in, 10 inches away from your deployment zone, and for your closest one. But your enemy's one is 30 inches the other side of the field, so it's very far. So this is okay. We can reliably hold 2 of these objectives, the one that we have in our zone, and with a 1-inch advance, you're already in range of the second one to score primary. So we can easily score 2 objectives. It'd be really hard for us to project force onto the other 2 though, unless we're rolling over. So yeah. So that's difficult to do. The secondary here is the siphon action. So if you're within range, you can siphon it for the turn, and the more you have, the more victory points you have. So considering we're just on 2 objectives, we're scoring 3 victory points on the secondary. So we need to do that for 5 turns to max it. Let's say we're going to get like 3 or 4 times 9 to 12 points on that. So it's not the most ideal secondary for us is the siphon one. And the primary is difficult. So this is like a medium rating for us, mission 3, 4 pillars. Okay, No Man's Land. So that's mission number 4. This is, again, Hammer and Anvil. Okay, and this has the only mission with a objective in the middle of the field. The only one. So from going from ITC where they added all these midfield objectives to now these objectives where there's only one mission with something in the middle is certainly a little bit against what we were made to believe was that we'll be camping the middle. Now, maybe, of course, Brian was referring to the GT pack. So hopefully that will be the case. So this primary is easy for us to do because we're at least holding one in the middle and then probably 1 or 2. The one to the side is just 12 inches away, and the one behind us is 20 inches away, but we can leave someone back there. And so we can probably project force to either side. So we could hold up to 4 objectives in this mission, which is pretty good. And then the secondary here is you have to control the central objective, and you get number of points equal to the battle round. So even if you only start holding that from turn 3, you're still getting 3, 4, so that's 7, 5, 12. So you're still getting 12 out of 15 victory points if you just start holding it from turn 3. So that's pretty good. So overall, I give this a good mission for us, mission 4, No Man's Land. All right, mission 5 is Scorched Earth. Basically same as AOS where you can raise objectives. So basically this is another Dawn of War here, and there are 6 objectives, 3 on each side, like a little circle basically, and they're 36 inches apart laterally and 24 inches apart that way, and nothing in the middle. So these are pretty far. So we're talking about 12 inches apart on the 3 on one side. So what you could do is try and turn the mission into a hammer and anvil and hold 2 to 3 on that one side. The 2 in your zone are 24 apart, so even then it's hard to hold that. So really kind of turn it into that, or maybe that way. So maybe hold 2 or 3. So not great. And then the secondary here, and of course, so if you hold your opponent's 2, the 2 in your opponent's zone, you can raise them and then they're gone. They don't count for primary or secondary scoring after that. So raising is pretty powerful. If you raise, if you take the secondary here, which is end game raising, you score 5 points if one objective marker was removed due to a raise, and if you raise 2 objectives, then you score 15 points. So hard for us to do that one. So overall, this one is tough for us. This mission 5. Okay, the last mission is Vital Intelligence. Okay, so this is an intel mission, basically. So this is a Vanguard Strike. Okay, and they have, for a 44 by 60 table, they've given us blue measurements to measure the deployment zones, which is great. And they're easy. They are just 15 and 20 inches. So the easy Vanguard Strike now with the smaller table. But you see there's 4 objectives across the middle, and then 1 in each deployment zone. So this one, and this is, they're not in the middle. In fact, it is 12 inches from the middle along the diagonal, and then 12 further inches further on. So 24 inches between the closest 2 there. And then it's 36 inches between the 2 in our zones. So it's pretty tough. Now, so on this kind, you could probably hold your own and then hold 2 others because they're only 12 inches apart. So you're talking like 3, and this is the only mission out of the 6 where to score 1 primary point, you need to hold 2 objectives, and to score, and then 3 objectives, and then more objectives. So all the other ones were hold 1, 2, and more. This is hold 2, 3, and more. So we're really scoring less on primary on this mission too. And the secondary objective is that 1 unit can, if it's within range of the objective, can collect the intel. And if they can do that for the whole round, then you score a number of victory points equal to the number of objectives you control. So if you're thinking you hold 2 to 3, then you're scoring 3 victory points. So you have to do that for 5 rounds. So it could be doable, like 9 to 12 points, I think is reasonable to expect from that secondary. So this is like a medium for us, mission 6. Okay, so overall thoughts on these missions. I'm hoping that the GT book will give us better missions. I don't really like these missions. The primaries are all the same. All the objectives are fairly spread apart. Only 1 mission has an objective in the middle. And so it doesn't really live up to the hype that we thought we would just be camping in the middle. These missions really encourage mobile forces, and we are not that. And split forces, and we are definitely not that either. So overall, I think the overall rating for these missions is not super good for us, but there's probably 2 or 3 of them we can really compete on. There is no killing at all for primary, if you notice that. And many of the secondaries you don't have to kill either. So you could actually win a complete game without killing anything. So that is a big swing. You know, there's not a lot of killing involved to win these missions necessarily. And so yeah, and none of the optional secondaries in these missions involve killing either. So, you know, it's really about holding. The game, these missions are really about holding territory, holding objectives. And while we do that, we got to get there first. So that makes it difficult. Objectives are far apart. Yeah. And so when things are so far apart and you have so few models, and now our coherency has shrunk, it's going to be difficult for us. You might even start bringing back things like bikes, but bikes have unit of 5 unless you want lower coherency. Then they're kind of off about on their own. They're so expensive, but who knows? Like, we might need bikes to compete in these kind of missions. Venatari are useful, but they have their own inherent problems, but they give us that mobility that we lack. Now, keep in mind that terrain influences this a lot. We don't know what terrain's going to look like. I know what my terrain's going to look like, but this is just abstract maps without terrain on it, so you have to keep that in mind as well. But I don't really like these missions, but we can play them, and so we'll see what the GT book brings out. But it's basically my thoughts on these Rulebook Eternal War missions. Okay. So that is it. Let's go to the questions. I'm running out of voice here. If you've got questions in the chat, please post them. I'm going to go to the Discord. And hopefully I would have answered most of these already. Which secondaries do you think we should take? Okay, I already answered that. Storm shields, we don't know. What are you looking for during Twitch? What am I looking for during Twitch stream on Saturday? Oh, the GW stream? I don't know. Maybe points. What are the biggest gains and nerfs you expect? That's hard to answer. Sorry. How will GW writing Forge World rules help the meta? Who knows? I think that as I already said many times, they need to get rid of rules that don't have models. If Indominus isn't a starter box, then what do you expect the starter box to look like? No idea. I think it is a starter box, personally. And then you can just get to start collecting boxes. So I think it is a starter box. AOS question, I won't answer that. Based on what you've seen, what factions are the biggest winners and losers? Well, I don't think, we are a big winner from the transition to 9th. I think everybody wins a bit and loses a bit, but I think we won quite a lot, but also a lot of that is because we have a new book right now. So it's hard to know. We'll find out pretty soon who the winners and losers are. What do you think is the release timetable on the new codexes? No idea. No idea. Is the Ares viable? I think it's as viable as it has ever been if you wanted to use it. I don't think it's the most ideal thing to use. Too many points. What's the best paint scheme for Custodes? If you could change one unit in the Adeptus Custodes Codex, what is it and what would you change? Bikes. I like bikes to be good, but not like that everybody just takes bikes. I don't know how you would change that. Cheaper would help. A little bit cheaper. Now that we know most of the non-core detachments cost 3, do you think it's worth paying this for elite armies to avoid paying the troop tax? I don't think you're paying a troop tax. I think you need troops. I mean, just look at the missions. Look at the secondaries. Look at the missions. We need troops. All right? Like, battalion, I'm toying between 2 patrols and a battalion because we need at least 2 guardian units if you want to do any kind of holding and still do something else. So I think 2 big guardian units is the minimum, actually. But a battalion might work. So yeah, so the troop is not a tax. Troop is necessary. And so will we be seeing a lot of vanguards and stuff like that? I don't know. It depends how important those models are to you, because you get 6 in the battalion for elites, and you get plenty of spaces in a battalion. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of those special detachments, because are you going to be spending that much CP, 25% of your starting CP, and you already on top of already what you got in a battalion? So I don't think we're going to see a lot of the specialist detachments. And troops are definitely not a tax. Troops are very much necessary, as everybody's been telling us. What terrain being revealed, how much do you think it helps us? I think the terrain is basically the same. What do you think the strongest units will be for Custodes? I think Terminators are going to be the strongest, and the Telemon. Sleeper units. I think bikes may surprise us, especially if we need them for objective play. So what missions do you believe the secondary is worth taking? Which missions do you believe the secondary is worth taking? Oh, sorry, I covered that. Do you feel there's any reason to take any detachments other than a battalion? Yeah, I think double patrol or battalion will be our armies. I think 2 CP for patrol is okay because it allows you to cut 1 guardian unit basically and take more elites. So I think double battalion and 2 patrol allows you to take 2 shield hosts. The battalion just take 1. So I think those are the two things we're going to see a lot of. Alaris, Vexilla, or Foot? Foot. I don't know why you would run Alaris. I know Richard likes to do it for the extra wound. Okay. You've got the points, I guess. Like, you're not going to deep strike it, because if you deep strike it, you don't get the benefit of the Vexilla, and you can't homer on that turn you come in, so I don't really see much point in taking the Alaris. It doesn't have a weapon. Yeah. So, yeah. When we talk to Richard next week about his game, I mean, he wishes that Vexilla had a weapon, I tell you that. Okay, will Custodes be a foot-heavy army? Yes. Which secondaries do you think are auto-take? I don't know if any of them are auto-take. Some of them are good as I went through, and some of them are not good. So I don't think there's auto-take, and there's a lot of variety. Attrition and assassinate are strong. Okay, that wasn't a question. Which secondaries are a trap? I talked about that already. What do you think our core will be for missions? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Sorry. How are we going to deal with vehicles and things like the Hammerfall bunker? Well, we don't know anything about the bunker yet. And vehicles, we just have to do what we usually do, which is to hit them. And the Telemon helps for vehicles. Do you think transports will be viable for us? So, I do. I think, so our transports are the Cronus and the Land Raider. We won't talk about the Rhine for now. And I think they are viable because after they drop you off, you can just, wheel them over to an objective and hold. Now, they can't do any actions, but, they can still hold stuff. So I think they're viable for sure. And if it's very dense, they could block up, move block and stuff like that. The problem with both of them is they're so expensive. They do add some killing, so there's that. But they are very expensive. You buy a couple of transports, you've spent over, like 40% of your army cost already. So it's hard, And so the one phrase that really is relevant to us in 9th is the phrase opportunity cost. Now, if you don't know what that means it is the cost of what you don't get by doing something else. Okay, so if you play 2 Land Raiders, you don't have almost 700 points to spend on something else. So that is opportunity cost. If you spend 2 CP on this stratagem, you now don't have 2 CP to spend on some other stratagem. So it's all about opportunity cost for us because we are high points, low number of models, and only 2,000 point limit. So there's lots of opportunity cost in army building. And then during the game, we have low number of units with limited movements and low number of attacks. So we have opportunity cost about where we go and what we shoot at and what actions we do. And doing an action is an opportunity cost. And so everything is about opportunity cost. So when you're making a decision about your list or even how you're playing, you have to think about what else you could be doing instead. And if you're happy with that, go for it. If you're not happy with that, don't go for it. Everything is actually good in our book right now, which is a great position to be in for everything to be good. So really then it just comes down to preference and opportunity cost. So that's it. If you can accept your preference and your opportunity cost, then your choice is probably no better or worse than any other choice. It's just dependent on what you are trying to do. Okay. Deep strike, SM fortification, blah, blah, blah. What would you want us to get for a piece of terrain? Answered that already. Golden toilet. Land Raiders answered that. Other than Black Templars who hate Psychers, what chapter would Indominus box be? No idea. AOS, what new factions could be added for 40k? I don't know. Squats. Squats. How do Forge World units fit in with 9th edition? Well, we talked about that a lot, but we will see when the Forge World book comes out. With all the talk about Storm Shield rules, what do we do with our Guardians with Sword and Board now? Nothing. They're either the same or they're better. What do you hope to see in the Custodes 9th edition Codex? I don't know. It's hard. I'm not going to start thinking about that. That could be like a year from now. Venatari. I think Venatari are one of our sleeper units if we do need the mobility. Calexis Assassin, good or nah? I have a Calexis in every list right now because being able to get your opponents to fight at the end is super good. And on top of that, he gives a Psyker thing, and he helps us deny those Psyker secondaries. And at the worst, he just sits at the back and can do actions because he's infantry. And so... I think actually for 95 points, the Calexis is pretty good, and I would never use the 2CP to switch him around. I would just use him as a objective holder if he's not useful in that matchup. So he's in my list right now, the Calexis. God tier, delicious, Thousand Suns player tiers. All right, guys, I am done. It's almost 2 hours. Yeah, his aura shuts off, so if you need the aura, don't make him do an action. So thank you very much, guys, for watching. It's been a long show, but there was a lot to go through. Next week, we are going to have a podcast episode. There will be no Tactica next week, but we are having our first stream game return to the channel on Wednesday next week. So stay tuned to the channel and to the Discord chat to look for the upcoming shows and the schedule. Join the Discord. Link is right there. Become a patron if you want to support what we're doing. Thank you for following. Thank you for watching. And good night, everybody.